your Chargers linebacker, Daiyan Henley, and you're tuning in with Chargers Unleashed.
Welcome to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner here with you from the LA Football Network. If this is your first time tuning into the show, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. You can also follow Chargers Unleashed on Facebook, Twitter, Spotify, Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Dan Wolkenstein has been on a long and drug-out vacation. Dan Wolkenstein, I would say probably in the last 6 days, has spent 5 hours in California. He has gone back and forth between Las Vegas. He is now currently up in Seattle for a family wedding. So he has just been a man on the move. But I know that we have not gotten an opportunity to really dig into the nitty gritty and discuss all of the, let's just call it fallout of the first wave of free agency here over the last week or so. Lots of comments to obviously talk about as far as the Chargers' approach to free agency, both pre and post as far as the start of the tampering period last Monday. Before I even got in here, I'm looking at the comments in this section. And oh boy, it's going to be a big topic of discussion today as it relates to Joe Ortiz. I want to break down, obviously, your guys' thoughts as it relates to the Chargers strategy. The cap space, obviously, is a big topic of discussion as it relates to what has taken place or not taken place, depending on what side of the fence that you're on as it relates to the Chargers' moves in free agency. But we know that we're also in, as they like to say, nut crunching time right before the NFL draft. So this is where everything's going to get really spicy as the first wave of free agency kind of fades away. All eyes are going to turn to the NFL draft. So obviously want to talk about some topics on that as well, especially as it relates to free agency correlating with the draft. With the moves that have been made thus far, what are going to be the Chargers' strategy when it comes to April 23rd? As of right now, they only have 5 draft selections. What are they ultimately going to do? But of course, in the midst of this, we're going to take your questions. Whatever you guys want to ask, get them in the chat. I will do my best to go through this and answer them for you. I am not accustomed to solo live shows, so bear with me if it does get a little rough. I do apologize. But happy to see all of you in here on a Wednesday night, of course. I'm just kidding. All I see is just a repetitive shame on Ortiz comments here. Shame on Ortiz. Shame on Ortiz. Let's go to one that's a little bit. Let's go to the one that's a little bit better. I know that there was a comment in here as far as what's everybody drinking tonight. That's usually the topic that Dan likes to talk about the most. What is everybody drinking on a Wednesday night? Put it in the chat, put it in the comments. What do you guys like to drink when you guys join these live shows? Because we know we can always just get a little bit loose and let our emotions take over. But that's how we do it here on Chargers Unleashed. That's what makes it fun. So put it in the chat. What are you guys enjoying for yourself on a Wednesday night? Or excuse me here. What are you guys enjoying for yourself on here on a Wednesday night? And we will, of course, get to all of your questions. Cold Diet Dr. Pepper is in the chat. Protein smoothie, just left the gym. I am right on your level. Well done. I know all about that. Please don't drink this. Please do not be drinking bleach. I know we're all in a very tough mindset as it relates to Joe Ortiz right now and the state of the Chargers and the free agency, but don't ever bring yourself to be drinking this, especially any type of situation, whether it's after a Chargers loss or right now. Please don't be doing this. So let's not go to that extreme. Obviously, as I mentioned, we're going to get into the topics of discussion as it relates to the Chargers free agency, what they have done, because I will say, as much as we would like to talk about the negative that has taken place over the last, say, 4 or 5 days or so, so many people message me on Twitter saying, Joe Ortiz has done absolutely nothing. And I would respectfully disagree. I know that there are some moves that have not been made yet that you would expect it to be made, especially as it relates to the $100 million in cap space pretty much that the Chargers had at the beginning of the season. And trust me, I am right there with you. I am fully on board with that. But I wouldn't say that they haven't done anything. Could they have done more? I think is the better response to put out there. because that I will agree with. Do I have some criticisms as it relates to the Chargers moves in free agency? Absolutely. I don't think that they are absolvent of that whatsoever, given the fact that Justin Herbert was hit more than any other quarterback in the NFL last year, behind one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL, coming from a GM and a head coach that had talked about since their first days walking in the office that tip of the spear was the offensive line, that's what they needed to invest in. You saw what took place 2 seasons ago now in the Houston playoffs, and your offensive line fail you in that game. And that was when you had a healthy Rashawn Slater and a healthy Joe Alt. And yet you pretty much ran it back, save for the Mekhi Becton signing. You ran it back with the same crew 1 year later. And now you bring in Mike McDaniel, which universally was loved by the entire fan base. You get away from the Greg Roman base offense. You get away from the Burger King offense, as he liked to call it. And you bring in one of the more innovative play callers as it relates to offense in the NFL. And it opens up a whole number of possibilities as it relates to not only Justin Herbert, but the rest of the weapons that he has around him. And you can see that obviously they have invested in that. You could at least say that. I will say the moves that Joe Ortiz made before the kickoff to free agency, I thought were very savvy, very smart. Bringing in Tyler Biadasz to be your new center, obviously with Bradley Bozeman retiring, you knew that you were going to have an opening there. Regardless of whether it was going to be a retirement or a release, you knew you had to do something at the position. And I thought that the signing of Tyler Biadasz at the contract that he got before Tyler Linderbaum really reset the market was a very savvy move by Joe Ortiz. You bring in Alec Ingold as a true fullback to essentially replace Scott Matlock on the offense. You bring in a new tight end to replace Will Dissly, one that could be a hell of a lot more versatile for you, better blocking production, is underrated as a receiver. So you're starting to stack these pieces around Justin Herbert. Then, of course, way back in January, you had already gotten one of your big offseason moves done in re-signing Teair Tart. You got bring in Khalil Mack back under contract, which everybody wanted to see happen. But this is where the time came where you were started to get a little bit confused of the moves that were not made. And I've had plenty of discussions with Dan about this. $100 million in cap space for the Chargers. If we're not using it to bring in some of the top offensive linemen in this free agency period, or if you weren't going to use it to bring in more of the reasonable contracts that you saw that were given out to some of the guards that were out there, namely the Jenkins contract, which you figure just had so many ties to the Chargers. I know he was obviously injured last year and playing in Green Bay. It was kind of writing was on the wall after a signing that they did that he ended up getting released, but that would have been a very low, under the radar, not against the comp pick formula for Joe Ortiz. And when you saw the numbers that came out on that contract, you thought to yourself, well, why weren't the Chargers in on this one? And if you're not going to pay those numbers, then what were you going to pay for? Then, of course, everything pivots to the Wyatt Teller situation. And Houston snags him up. And no word at all of whether or not the Chargers were in on those discussions or not. So we still stand here now, today, March 18th, with your offensive lineman that you have signed under contract for this next year, outside of Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt. Tyler Biadasz being the premier signing so far. Cole Strange, who was brought in on a little bit more of a hefty contract than some people may have thought, but obviously familiarity with Mike McDaniel during his time in Miami. And then you bring back depth pieces, Trevor Penning, Trey Pipkins, which as of now, one of them could be considered a starter until the Chargers end up drafting a rookie to take over that left guard spot. But it is perplexing because if the Chargers were not going to use that money to spend, to invest in the offensive line, to protect their franchise, to protect Justin Herbert, and as I have told Dan this, I know nobody would have been comfortable with the money that Zion Johnson got, but at the same time, when you look at it in hindsight 2020, if the money wasn't going to be used for certain other offensive linemen, technically in retrospect now you had enough money to where you could have re-signed him. And when we heard of the details on that, it looked like there was a few other things under there that were in addition to why Zion ended up taking the deal in Cleveland. So it does look like the Chargers did end up trying to re-sign him, but there were some other elements that drew Zion to Cleveland. And then you look at the defensive side of it. We knew when we had Brett Coleman on this show, when we were right at the beginning of free agency, and you started seeing some of the big name edge rushers and the contracts that they were getting coming right off the board, you knew right then and there that you were not going to be able to bring back Odafe Oweh. And at the contract that he got, $25 million a year, yes, it's steep. And there was no way that the Chargers were going to be in on that. But you look in retrospect, where was the money put elsewhere? So it's going to be interesting to see now where the Chargers sit, what their strategy is going to be to fill in some of their key positions. Now, past all of the things that we want to get in line to say against Joe Ortiz as far as the moves that he hasn't made, I think that he's done a very good job of bringing back some of the key names that we knew as far as free agency goes that you would say, yeah, I want to have that guy back. Del'Shawn Phillips, key special teams player last year, turned out to be Ryan Fitkin's ace. You bring back Denzel Perryman, who was a great complement to the running game in that linebacker unit, which actually could be looked at as a very, I don't want to say underrated, but sneaky good. We don't know what the Junior Colson situation is going to pan out to be, but at least it gives the Chargers a little bit more leverage as it relates to this NFL draft, because I still would not put it past them to spend a day 3 selection on a linebacker, considering how good this linebacker class is. And since we don't know what Junior Colson really is at this point in his career, you may just be getting a little bit more insurance for a future move on that. And then, of course, the big one, earlier news today, the return of Unc. Tony Jefferson returns to the Chargers for this season. And when you put these pieces together, especially as it relates to Chris O'Leary, there's not that many pieces defensively, as far as the holes go, that you need to fill. And for the Chargers, you could look at it as one of two ways. Either it's good news or it's bad news, considering the fact that as of right now, they only have 5 draft picks. But you'd like to have more. You'd like to have insurance. You'd like to get as many playmakers as possible. And if there is one thing that Joe Ortiz has shown us over the last 2 years, is that his draft results are looked at better than his free agency results, depending on who you want to argue with that. 2 years ago in free agency, with all the moves that he did in the limited cap space that the Chargers had, I thought was well done. This free agency period, there's a lot of warranted questions behind it. Let me see if I can get back to some of your questions. I know that was kind of a long, drawn-out rant as it relates to the free agent market and what has taken place for the Chargers. But let me kind of go through these comments for you guys on right now. So from Brennan Lane, 4,700. Let's look at it this way. Alt and Slater are the leaders on the line that are going to have a line meeting personally. We are going to be okay. Watch this line in McDaniel's offense is going to be sneaky good. This is the other thing that I wanted to actually bring up. Because if you guys remember, during the season last year, hang on one second. Let's just fix this for a second. See what's going on here. Hang on. Gotta love technical difficulties going on in the middle of a live show. There we go. I brought this up. This was actually brought up from an article back in January, where it was a list of the most money that was spent on offensive linemen, or just not an offensive lineman, but offensive line entirely. And the Miami Dolphins were down at the bottom. They were like between 27 and 30. And when you look at that, there is more context to that, because Miami going into that season back in March, they were very hamstruck as it relates to their cap space. I think they were like 5 or 7 million over the cap going into last offseason. And unfortunately, they couldn't do any moves, whether it was for their offensive line or really any other position. So it's interesting to me now, because especially if you read the articles from Daniel Popper talking about the philosophy and Mike McDaniel and bringing in some of his guys, I would have thought, if I was McDaniel and I was hamstrung like that by the front office and some of the big time contracts that were thrown out, and I couldn't spend on my offensive line, you'd think that when you have $100 million in cap space at your disposal, maybe you might try to get a few extra guys and maybe a little bit higher price. That's just me. That's the way I've looked at it. Again, it is free agency. I understand both sides of the coin. For the optimists that are on here that want to look at it to, from the standpoint to say, the season's just starting. We know there's a lot of ways to go. We still have the NFL draft to go through. I totally get it. And I hope that your mindset is proven right. We still don't know what's going to take place in between now and the rest of the season. As Joe Ortiz likes to say, the signing, free agency, team building, that never stops. But you still have about 52 million in current cap space right now. Is that being saved for a trade during the draft, after the draft, waiting for certain players to get cut post June 1st? Is this being saved for, I know some people have thrown it out as far as being saved for a Thule or a Derwin extension, which I get, but at the same time, it's not doing anything to your cap this year. So it's essentially money that you're going to inflate but not spend based on the current philosophy. I'm not sure. So the main question out there has been, what is the plan? What is the plan? I think that's what all of us are trying to figure out. I think all of us are trying to figure that out. As Alex Silver here says, who's left? Exactly. Mighty Kev, don't judge until August, in my opinion. Exactly. Dom Wade, I'm not going to judge the offseason until after the draft, which is completely fair. It's completely fair. I think the biggest thing for the concern, as far as that goes, is that is the wild card as it stands right now. Remember, Joe Ortiz and the Chargers, they surrendered 2 draft picks last year in the trade for Austin Decklet, or I'm trying to remember now. It was Deculus, Penning, and then, of course, the Odafe Oweh trade that really paid off for you. But now you're in this game now, kind of wondering what Joe Ortiz is going to do, because the Chargers have only 5 draft picks heading in to April 23rd. As I was trying to find, there it is. I'm open to trading down. My God, I have been saying this for 10 years through 2 different front offices. This would be the draft to do it. The Chargers sitting at 22, especially now with what you kind of heard with certain positions and certain players, namely Peter Woods, Caleb Banks suffering the foot injury at the combine, which is just crazy to think from the standpoint that he finished the drills that he ended up taking place in. So the value for interior defensive line, which of course is a position of need for the Chargers on this, that kind of goes down a little bit. You probably don't look at that at 22 as a possibility. So my focus was, considering that there's a big need for edge across from Thule, Khalil Mack is still only going to be a Band-Aid at best for 1 more year. You have to figure out who's going to be able to be the next pairing with Thule for the next 5 years. Who is that going to be? You need a long-term plan. TJ Parker is the value there at 22 for edge, maybe not at 22. Of course, all of us would love to have Big Vega out of Penn State fall to us at 22. I just don't see that happen. I know that Daniel Jeremiah put him in his latest mock draft 3.0 this week. And man, oh man, would that be a godsend if he ends up falling to the Chargers as 2? How fast can you sprint to the podium if Big Vega landed at 22 for the Chargers? I just can't see that happening. Not when you look at the rest of the teams that are ahead of them that have their own offensive needs, specifically on the offensive line, especially as it relates to the Baltimore Ravens. Once again, Jesse Minter is going to know all about the value of offensive linemen, and considering the fact that he experienced it himself and having to witness his franchise quarterback being hit every single week at the rate that Justin Herbert was. So I could totally see Baltimore going offensive line. Detroit, 100% going offensive line there. You're going to need a couple players to fall in order to skirt the possibility for Venga to fall to you at 22. And naming all of these, it leads me to the belief that the Chargers could be very much open for business at 22. I looked at when we saw the Miami Dolphins trade to the Denver Broncos and acquire their 30th overall selection. That's a possibility for a trade down. I could see that very well happening. We'll see when it ends up coming to draft time, but I 100% think that the Chargers could be open to trading down just because of the way that the draft looks like it may fall. I know we're still early here. We're about 5 weeks out from the NFL draft. But the way that it looks like it could fall with the players that you know that they're going to value, with the way that the positional board is going to shake out. And of course, as it relates to this team only having 5 picks, you need to acquire some. And whether it's trading back at 22 or waiting to 55 to execute a trade back, this 100% should be on the board for Joe Ortiz in this front office. Absolutely. I want to get to some of your guys' comments here as they were coming through there as it relates to the NFL draft. What is the value pick at 22 then? I mean, Venga would essentially be a value, a luxury, a lucky pick, whatever you want to call it. The fact that he would even make it to 22, I think at this point in time would be considered huge value. It's not much at 22. I'm a huge fan of Caden McDonald, but again, the way that you've seen the interior defensive line market shift, especially with Peter Woods obviously not performing at the combine, the pro day was okay. And then everything that's taking place with Caleb Banks and the news that he got from his injury, I think is going to drop him down some levels, which of course is going to in turn raise the stock of Caden McDonald. I am a huge fan of Caden McDonald. I would love to see him paired next to a guy like T.R. Tart, and you put him in now with two jumbo interior defensive linemen with Tart and Tomlinson. You could wreck some shop there. You talk about putting an emphasis on stopping the run. That would be huge. But again, because you've made that move with Tomlinson, obviously you let go of Deshaun Hand. You didn't end up bringing him back. I don't think that that's your value move there. So as you start to go through these positions, maybe I know some people are a little bit indifferent on this, and the people had a lot to say about Daniel Jeremiah's mock 2.0. But if Sadiq's there, is he the value pick? I know it is not a position of need whatsoever, given the fact of what you've done. But is that the value pick if he happens to land there? I don't believe that he's going to make it to 22. I'm simply just putting it out there. And again, as you go through and you check off some of these boxes as far as going through the positions of need, what's the ones that you want to focus on? It still leads you back to the same road that the Chargers should be trading out of 22. In my opinion, that's what I think. Let's see. How mad would I be if they don't draft a guard until like the 7th? Well, I'll tell you this. I was mad last year when they waited as long as they did to invest in their offensive line. I was concerned after the free agency moves that they did or did not do enough of last year. And then when you parlay that to see what they didn't do in the draft just a month later, this is why we had to endure what we had to endure watching the Chargers and this offensive line last year. And I know you can never account for injuries, and losing your best two players on the offensive line is going to change and affect a lot of things. But these are coming from the same front office and the head coach that said offensive linemen were the tip of the spear. Now, I will say this. As I have said with Jim Harbaugh and the culture that he has changed for this team, I think when you look at the coaches that has now been brought in to overhaul the offense, the enthusiasm should be better. That message and that belief that coaching is going to be able to affect the production of certain players, even ones that are possibly looked at to be a low level or a depth signing. I believe that with this coaching staff and Mike McDaniel and Butch Barry, things are going to improve overall as a whole. And you have to give it to Jim Harbaugh. It was a big move for him to separate from Greg Roman. As much as we can sit here as outsiders and criticize it, and even though that criticism is warranted given the results that were had, Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman had a long history. That was not an easy decision for him, but obviously it was necessary in the big picture for this team, Justin Herbert, and this franchise, when you see that they go to the playoffs 2 consecutive years in a row and end up 0-2. You cannot have the same results anymore when you ran it back with the same personnel, with the same offensive coaching, assistant coaches at that time, and you're still getting the same, if not worse, results. So I do believe that coaching is going to have a very, very positive outcome as it relates to this roster and this upcoming season, specifically at the offensive line. That being said, there is no way in hell that Joe Ortiz, anybody that is making decisions in that war room on draft day, should be waiting till, call it even day 3. The Chargers should not even allow their decision makers to make it past round 2 without investing in the offensive line. If we get to May 1st and the Chargers went 2 other directions other than an offensive lineman with either of their first and second round picks, I don't know what to do at that point. I really don't. That's a lot of trust that would be elsewhere, and I just can't see that happening. I really don't. So I do believe that in the first 2 selections of the Chargers, you are going to see an offensive line taken for them 100%. Let's see what else we got here. Trade down, get Avion Terrell lockdown corner, pick up another second round pick, third, and address guard in the second or third. You know, there's been talk about the Chargers. You go back to the question that was asked as far as the value pick. Is it corner? Is it corner? Maybe it is corner. You're talking about now as a defensive coordinator that you bring in Chris O'Leary, who obviously coached the Chargers safeties 2 years ago. You have such a versatile defensive backs coach in Coach Steve Klingscale. And we know how well prepared he wants to get his corners in this system, be versatile enough to play multiple positions, because he understands that at the end of the day, injuries happen. So the next man up mentality is very much at top of mind for Steve Klingscale and his DBs. You obviously lost Benjamin St-Juste in free agency. Jackson's only going into his contract year because he was signed for 2 years. So it is a position I would say that you may want to start looking at a year early rather than a year late. But is corner a value position depending on who is going to be there? But I 100% agree with the second part of the sentence. Pick up another second round pick. I would totally be okay with trading out of 22 and acquiring that. Or if you're trading back at 55 and acquiring an additional third or even an additional fourth, it just gives you more swings and opportunities at the bat to build this roster, not just from especially positions that you need starting quality caliber players, but as Joe Ortiz has shown he's liked to do, something that the previous administration for this team did not like to do, and that was build depth. So it gives you more flexibility on that. This is an interesting one. Do I think a QJ trade would get us an offensive guard? This has been another question that's been thrown out there because there were reports leading up to the beginning of free agency that Quentin Johnston was on the market. And if you look at the wide receiver room right now as it stands for the Chargers, would I like to see Quentin Johnston traded? I'm not going to necessarily say yes, because I think that he's made tremendous progress with Coach Sanjay Lal. This coaching staff 100% believes in Quentin Johnston. That being said, going into a contract year, you don't know whether the fifth-year option is going to be picked up. So that leads him as a possible trade commodity. And the Chargers have obviously shown that with previous players that they are willing to possibly let walk, or if you have an opportunity to trade them, if there's a deal there, if there is one of the rare situations like this where it could be a player-for-player swap, maybe that is something that is, secret door number 5 that Joe Ortiz is thinking about as it relates to the lack of moves for this offensive line. Have no idea who you could possibly get. You could look at a number of wide receiver teams if you're looking at a possibility. But Joe Ortiz has shown he's done that because he traded away Keenan Allen for a 4th-round pick just a few years back. I think that you can net the same, honestly, at this point in time for Quentin Johnston right now. I think you could net a 4th if it's going to end up just being a draft pick alone. Or are you going the route where you're doing a rare player-for-player swap? I could see that. Let's see who we go here. I don't see Ortiz trading up. I know that we have seen him doing this over the past couple of years. Obviously, he did it with the Ladd McConkey trade, which I would say turned out pretty good, but not with the current draft capital that they have right now. You only have 5 picks. You're not going to mortgage your future for what you currently have right now with the number of holes that you're left to fill, especially with the lack of moves that you've done for the offensive line in free agency. So I can't see them giving away picks to jump up to get an offensive line. Let's see. Sorry, just kind of going through some of your guys' questions here. I love this topic because I want to touch on KLS. When we're talking about players that could fit in Mike McDaniel's system, I'm so excited about the potential for Keandre Lambert-Smith in this offense. I think this offense is tailor-made for Keandre Lambert-Smith. What you're looking to build now over the next couple of years with Ladd McConkey, with Trey Harris, KLS can thrive in this. He's essentially your big-time, your other speedster outside of Ladd McConkey, but your true downfield threat. If you were to take Quentin Johnston out of this, he's going to be your downfield threat. We saw what that was like when we were watching him during training camp and preseason last year. It was great to see for a guy who was drafted in the 5th round. Of course, when it came to the regular season, the opportunities were limited. When he did get in there, he was able to make the most of it. Obviously, he ended up suffering a couple injuries that gave him a little bit of a rough rookie season for him, that he wasn't able to get as much starting time or as much starting snaps in the offense just because of who was running it, how it was tailored. The Greg Roman offense was really not for KLS, unfortunately, given with what you go back to see what his game was all about in college. I think it's 100% in line with what Mike McDaniel wants to do. So I would not see them trading KLS. And I know that people obviously having different feelings as it relates to KLS. So that's all right. Jeremy says, I have more hope for KLS than I do QJ. That's totally fair. I would say, as Dan likes to say, hopium is great. And truth be told, I could see a lot more value for the system in Mike McDaniel, but as far as comparing apples to oranges, hope for QJ, KLS, how they're going to fit in the system, right as of right now, Quentin Johnson has proved that he can do more. So, but I am thrilled, even if Quentin Johnson remains with this wide receiver unit, I'm thrilled to see what it's going to be like, because I think that KLS especially, but I also think that Quentin Johnson could find a very good spot in Mike McDaniel's offense if he is to remain with the team. 100%. Darius Davis is the odd man out that I do see out of here. I think that also kind of goes with the Mitchell signing, because if you look at the return game for the Chargers last year, man, did it struggle. It was a far cry from what we have seen from previous special teams units from Ryan Fitkin. But I absolutely believe that was one of a few reasons that Mitchell was brought in, not only because of his speed aspect and what you can do, essentially it's giving Mike McDaniel his A-chan in this offense. And you pair him with Omarion Hampton, Kamani Vidal. I think that's a very versatile group. If Mitchell wasn't signed, I could target day 3 running backs that the Chargers could be going for that you could say, okay, are going to fit that Devon A-chan mold. Jamari Taylor out of Virginia was one that I was actually thinking could perfectly fit that mold when you're looking at a guy who's got that type of speed, versatile enough to be a chess piece in both the run and the pass game. But the Chargers picking him up after the Raiders released him, I thought that was a tremendous move. It arguably may have been the best free agency move that they have made to date. And we're talking about a guy who's going to rotate in for RB2, RB3 snaps, but is versatile enough to give you some juice on special teams. And versatility is always going to earn you more spots on a roster when you can do more. So I do think that Darius Davis is going to be the odd man out. I actually expected him to be one of the cuts when we started kind of getting in those names of Will Dissly, of Mekhi Becton before it happened. But I think when it comes down to it, wouldn't put it past the Chargers at all, especially if we're looking for another speed element. If you're looking at day 3, starting at round 4, that you bring in another one of these wide receivers, because there's plenty in that mold that you can go and get that are going to have some juice behind them, some downfield ability. Or if you're even looking for more of a specialist that you could bring in for special teams, you can find that on day 3. Do I think that Trey Harris can step up and be our wide receiver 1? Yes, I think it's possible. And I'll say this, he has a better shot of doing it if Quentin Johnson is not on this roster. Even if let's say Keenan Allen is re-signed. If Quentin Johnson is not on this roster, I think that the amount of opportunities for Trey Harris would skyrocket. 100%. I think that the coaching staff knows that, given what he had put forth last year. I think he's ready to go as it relates to that next step. You saw as much as far as some of the difficult throws that Justin Herbert made to him, but you could already see that chemistry building throughout the season when he was getting progressively more and more snaps every week. So yes, I'm going to buy stock into this. I'm going to buy stock into this and say that this is 100% possible. I was a huge fan of Trey Harris coming out of Ole Miss. For those that do know, for those who have been watching the show for a long time, it was the day after last year's draft. And because Dan knows that I'm an absolute sicko as it relates to the NFL draft, getting hyped up about this time of year, I started diving into the wide receiver prospects. And I texted Dan because if I'm doing my math right, draft last year, day 1 was on April 24th. So that means that day 3 was on April 26th. On April 27th, I texted Dan and I said, I know who I want next year. And one of the first guys that I viewed was Trey Harris. And the way that he has progressed, again, it's not like talking about the same as, a Justin Jefferson or a Jamar Chase or one of these guys that gets selected very, very high and has huge expectations behind them. But when you look at where Trey Harris was drafted and what his responsibilities were for his rookie year, in a nutshell, you could say that he stepped up big time and did more than maybe what we would have expected of him. I put it very much so in a similar category to Ladd. There, you could see the connection even before the first snaps were taken between Ladd and Justin Herbert. You just knew right off the bat that those two were going to gel like glue. And I think if Tre Harris was given more opportunities this season, you would have seen the exact same thing between Tre Harris and Justin Herbert, 100%. So again, long-winded answer to this question, but yes, I 100% believe that that can happen. Let me answer this one first before I get to that next one. Jake, let's not be an idiot. If Ladd and Keenan get season-ending injuries, he could be considered wide receiver 1. Let's not buy in on that. Yeah, you never can account for those, but we don't need to talk about him. We don't need to put that out in the universe. We don't need to do that. We don't need to have a repeat situation of the offensive line to our wide receivers now. Jake, you called the Hampton draft last year. Who do you want this year? Venga would be the pick, but that's a pipe dream at this point. As I had mentioned earlier, Caden McDonald is someone that I'm a huge fan of, but as it relates to his draft stock, it's probably going to elevate for what's taken place with Peter Woods and Caleb Banks. And for the Chargers bringing in Dalvin Tomlinson, I'm not sure that your value is there essentially. So I don't know. It's tough to call the pick in the first round outside of Venga because you'd have to have a lot of things happen to have him fall in your lap. You'd essentially have to have a Rashawn Slater-like situation happen for you. And getting Venga to drop all the way to 22 is really steep at this point. So if we're looking at some of the other possibilities that I like come day 2, again, the Chargers should be in a really, really good position if they were to either trade out of 22, target a different position. Let's say that they drop to say between 28 and 30, whether that's an edge position or not. That could actually be a quality spot if TJ Parker is there, that you select that, because obviously you need an edge. That's huge right now. And then you come back around in the second round with the possibility of Chase Besantes falling to 55. I still think by the end of the day is going to be kind of steep. That would be another lucky star if he ended up falling that far. But there's plenty of other guards. Jennings Dunker being something that I think that would be a key spot for him in the second round. I think that you're eventually going to end up selecting a future center for this team? Yes, I do. But because you have Biadasz now, you can wait until day 3 on that. I know I may be in the minority as it relates to Jake Slaughter. He's been one of the most consistent players at that position over the last 2 years. But if you were to say to me, we can draft him to be the developmental center for the future, and you're picking him up in, say, round 4 or 5, I think that would be a very savvy move. Malachi Lawrence, who I just got a chance to watch this past week, really dive into Malachi Lawrence. You talk about a guy who is just absolute pursuer to the football, regardless of where it is, regardless who the quarterback is, regardless how far he has to go to get there. He's an absolute animal. But is it going to be in that? I do definitely think his draft stock is going to elevate. Danny Dennis Sutton is another one that I had to go back and rewatch after the combine, because the first time I was watching him in the games, I didn't see the type of juice that he put out in the athletic drills. And then you go and you watch his performance in the combine. It's one of the best of the entire group. And you say, okay, wait a minute. I got to go back and I got to rewatch some of this because maybe I missed something. But I really like what I've seen from him overall. Again, I didn't think as far as value goes that it could be one that you're spending a round 2 pick on. But I think if you go back to the combine and talking about some of the biggest winners, he's definitely on that list for sure. I have to chime in on this one because Logan Jones, yes, is another favorite, should be a favorite among many of the fans who obviously are talking about rebuilding this team 100%. The man is just a people mover. If you're looking for someone who's going to be bringing in that type of Harbaugh attitude, this would be where you look. Essentially, just go ahead and draft the entire Iowa offensive line, and you're going to be in good shape. Jennings Dunker, Bo Stevens, Logan Jones, every single one of those guys. has the attitude that Jim Harbaugh wants for his offensive line. Straight up ass kickers. Iowa just breeds offensive linemen in the draft 100%. Dan Wolkenstein making an appearance one way or another on the show. I know Dan, when I spoke to him just probably about an hour before the show, was drinking a gin and tonic. I wonder how many he's had up until this point. Probably thinking to himself, you know what? Jake can handle this show himself because I'm going to enjoy these gin and tonics a hell of a lot more than I am going to be talking to him about free agency and the NFL draft. I understand, Dan. I understand. Hope you're enjoying yourself, sir. Jake, I have a big question. Is Joe Ortiz waiting for the second wave of free agency after the draft to make moves so our Bolts keep both comp picks for Oweh and Zion Johnson? Well, as of right now, as we thought when Jamari Sawyer was signed by the Miami Dolphins, we were expecting that contract to be a hell of a lot more than what it ended up being. Again, we go back to the confusing moves of the offensive line. You paid more to Trevor Penning over Jamari Sawyer, who performed better. We could say last season, in my opinion, has better results and positional versatility than Trevor Penning. But again, we have to understand this isn't that system. As much as we would like it to make sense, it still doesn't entirely make sense to us, but it may to other people. So as of right now, you don't have that additional comp pick for Zion Johnson. And I can't remember what it was that took place that dropped the compensatory pick for Odafe Oweh from a 3 to a 4. If someone has any of that, by all means, put that in the chat because I would like to be refreshed on what that was. So I would say yes. Joe Ortiz is not a stranger to making moves, whether it's the second wave of free agency after the draft, hell, whether it's after preseason and during the week leading up to the regular season. Everybody remember the Elijah Molden trade and when that took place? A week before the season started. That trade paid off for you that season, for sure. So if there is one thing that we know that we've seen from Joe Ortiz, whether we agree with the moves or not, and you can take that from the Molden trade, you can look at that from the Odafe Oweh trade, he is at least trying to continuously churn the roster, something that we did not see from the previous regime whatsoever. The question is whether or not you agree with the players he brings in. And that's where the rub comes into play. But got to save that fourth compensatory pick, right? We'll see how that turns out. Over or under for Dan's drinks. I know Dan has had a rough 2 days. Dan is jet lagged because he has gone from Las Vegas back home for essentially 24 hours to now to a family wedding up in Seattle for the weekend. And when you have 2 kids and you're traveling like that, it's pretty tough. So I'm going to put the line. No, I'm going to put the line at 3.5. And he's probably going to think I'm an asshole, but I'm going to say he went over because man, oh man, did he probably need it. He started before dinner time tonight. I know he did. So, but I'm going to put the line at 3.5. And if he went under, congratulations, Wolkenstein, you were responsible and you're a good man. TD4637 says Penning has rare move traits, though. I guarantee that was a McDaniel decision. It very well might have been. It very well might have been. And the way that you see the way that things have played out over this first week and a half of free agency, I don't think that we can argue with that. Jim Harbaugh said that he wanted a head coach of the offense. Philosophies, whether you can agree with it or not as it relates to Trevor Penning coming back to the team, Cole Strange signing, whatever that may be, you know that Mike McDaniel is in on some of these decisions. It is a little bit frustrating when you look at some of the other ones that you feel as far as whether contractually or from positional fit-wise that you felt that the Chargers would be in on, and yet they weren't. I still believe that when we get to the beginning of the regular season as it starts right now, that you're Starting offensive line for the Chargers from left to right is going to be Rashawn Slater. Insert rookie first round, second round pick, whoever it is, at left guard. Tyler Biadasz as your center. Whether you agree with it or not, Cole Strange at right guard. And Joe Alt at right tackle. We'll see. Dan is slacking, drinking gin and tonic, providing Chargers content. It's more important than personal vacations. Dan's going to like that one. I guarantee you. He knows. I will say this. Dan wishes that over the last week or so that we would have been able to put out a little bit more content for you guys. I know that this is kind of like the big time of the year that we need to do so, but scheduling has just unfortunately gotten in the way for both of us now. And so we do apologize for that, but I guarantee you, he knows that when he gets back, it's go time. All roads lead to the NFL draft. We're going to be ready to go. And I know that we've got a couple special things that we're going to have in store for you guys over the next couple of weeks. Jake, let's get down to business. What are your thoughts on a picture of Whiskey Coke? Inside this liquor cabinet that you see behind me, there's a plethora of whiskey and bourbon. I'm a lover of both. Fire off whatever you got to me. I'm probably not going to do it with soda, so just give it to me either neat or on the rocks. Doesn't matter. But there's plenty of good whiskey and bourbons out there for anyone to try who's looking to step into it. I'm happy to give some recommendations to you. Hanan Derry, regular of the show. The NFL hates the Chargers. Putting the threshold to $27 million for a third and $16 to $25 million is now fourth. That is that they selected Oweh as the threshold at $25 million instead of Malik, $22.5 million. The conspiracy that we see that's against the Chargers. I will say this: the one that I did agree with, the one that I chose to side with everyone, was the Denzel Perryman suspension in the final two games of last year. It didn't make sense. I understand the I understand the penalty for the move. I understand the fine. Hell, I'd even agree with an in-game ejection if you wanted to go with it that far. But a 2-game suspension for a repeat offender when you're talking about the distance of when the last one took place, I don't know. But I am not a doubter of conspiracy theories. I know everybody loves to talk about the reoccurring conspiracy against the Chargers, that whenever it's coming up that they're on the clock for the draft, that's when the draft always will take a commercial. It's like clockwork every single time. Watch out for it this year. We'll see if they do it again. But it's literally like clockwork. You know, you go through 2 or 3 teams in progression, no breaks in between. But then you get to the Chargers pick and everybody's like, okay, we're on the clock. And then Rich Eisen says, we'll be right back with a word from our sponsors. As if Charger fans don't have it hard enough wondering who the hell Roger Goodell is going to announce at the podium. Jeremy, 5461, would love Pregnon. Absolutely. 100%. And I apologize if I did not mention him earlier when I was talking about the possibility for guards, but I do think that Emmanuel Pregnon, again, you asked me today, you asked me tomorrow, and I said this on previous shows. I have these two interchanging between my second and third favorite guard of the draft. Whether or not Basantes or Pregnon makes it to 55 is a huge question mark, honestly. And I think that you've kind of seen that when, especially now when you look at some of the teams and you look at some of the investments, because the NFL is such a parity league. And when you look at certain teams that have won Super Bowls over the past few years, it's all about the trenches. It's all about the message that Jim Harbaugh said that he wanted to implement with this team when he first got here. I think he just has yet to fully enable it the way that he would want it to. And whether that's from personnel, from coaching, take your pick. But we're still waiting to get Justin Herbert behind a great offensive line. You've got pieces. I'd say you've got 3/5 of that offensive line ready to go. But you need some more to make that work 100%. A couple more questions that I'm going to answer for you guys. You guys have been fantastic tonight. Again, I know I've been riding solo tonight. I know I've kind of jumped around, so I hope that I have been able to answer as many questions as possible. Hopefully, because I know one of Dan's gifts that he brings to the show is he knows really how to push the pace, knows when to switch the topics of conversation, and he keeps me kind of in line because I know that I can go off on my own rants. So if things have kind of seemed out there, random, I appreciate you guys sticking in and obviously supplying a lot of questions that really keep the show going. So it's been a nice conversation with you guys, but we're going to stay on for a couple more minutes and answer as many as I can for you. Let's see. Back to this as far as the whiskey question goes. I drink Classic Club whiskey, and it's so extremely horrible. I need a new recommendation. It's a little bit more on the pricey side, but if you're looking for just one that's going to last you a while because you don't need a lot of it, Basil Hayden is always a winner there. If you want to get a little bit more pricey, go with Booker's, which has a bite to it 100%. But those bottles are going to last you a while because you're only going to need to pour just a little bit to enjoy it for the evening. No question about it. Anon Dairy, Pregnon is better than Basantis. Totally understand the argument for that. What is the helmet in the background? That is Dr. Doom's helmet. I know a lot of people have actually asked me, it's like, can Jake wear this helmet on the show, please? And maybe after the draft. Maybe depending on the results of the draft. If it's good, if I think the Chargers hit a home run, if they draft any of the players that I'm super high on, I'll wear it. I'll wear it. We're having fun. I'm a huge Marvel nerd, so I geek out on a lot of those type of things. But that's why that's there. On this table that you guys can't actually see to the side, I actually have Iron Man's arc reactor that is also lit up. But I'm a huge Marvel nerd in that respect. Eagle Rare absolutely is another one for any of the whiskey or bourbon aficionados that are out there. Let's see. I think Ortiz will try to move down. Takes two to tango, though. Yes, this is always the conversation that we hear. We heard this all the way going back to Tom Telesco when you said, like, well, we were thinking about the possibility of trading down, but unfortunately, we just weren't able to execute, and we ended up taking our guy that we wanted instead. We didn't feel like we needed to move down. Whatever. We don't know what conversations happen behind the scenes, but if you're talking about the possibility, the way that the board looks, and again, with 5 weeks to go, that it's going to fall to the Chargers as far as what's the biggest priorities that you see right now and how does the value match up? The Chargers should be the aggressors here, trying to trade down. Given the fact of the board, given the fact that they have limited draft capital and needing to acquire more, 100% they should really go all in on trading back, in my opinion. Did I like the Spider-Man trailer? Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I thought it was for Dustin Daniel Cretton, for him obviously taking the reins for whatever future holds for this franchise. I thought it looked really solid. I thought it looked grounded, which is what a lot of people wanted to say. It's not the multiverse story that people are looking for or that people were, tired of during the past three films. But I mean, I was a huge fan of No Way Home. That was great nostalgia. That was great fan service. That felt like a comic book story within itself. And truthfully, that's my favorite one of that trilogy. So I think this one's got big shoes to fill to overtake that. But so far, I thought that was a good step in the right direction, 100%. Woodford Reserve, another one that is a regular of mine that I always drink, of course. You should wear the Doom helmet if they have a bad draft, not a good one. Why didn't I think of that? 100%. Basantis is great. Can't find it in Oregon. This is talking about, or Blanton's is great. Can't find, excuse me, I thought it said Basantis. Obviously, I can't read. Blanton's is great. Can't find it in Oregon. I've actually never had Blanton's. I've actually never had a Blanton's. So I'm willing to obviously try. TD4637, I could see a team trading up with us if Jordan Tyson or Sadiq are still there because the Eagles pick right after us. Yep. Chargers are in a good spot as it relates to if this scenario ended up happening, yeah, you could see it for a leapfrog situation. Obviously, the Eagles had signed Hollywood Brown. What was it, yesterday? Yesterday, they ended up making that move. I think that was actually a kind of a good value, call it under the radar move for them in terms of their receiving options. I thought he had a really productive year for Kansas City, given all the injuries that they suffered with their wide receivers last year. He really stepped up. So now if you're going to insert him in an offense with A.J. Brown, if he's still there, we'll see. Time will tell on that one. But I think that's a good spot for him and actually a really savvy move by the Eagles. But yeah, there's much more possibilities for the Chargers overall to make a move to trade down. 100%. To answer this quickly, am I feeling that a trade is brewing with how free agency is going? Yes, I do. But I also feel that, I feel at this point, it better happen. All things considered. Unless Vega Ioane ends up landing in your lap at 22, which you should be sprinting Roadrunner style all the way to the podium to make that announcement. If he is off the board, I know some people have talked about the possibility of Spencer Fano, falling to that position and possibly not playing his tackle position that he played in college and kicking inside the guard. I know a lot of people have that perception on him, but I think that his stock rose during the combine as well. Did you guys see him moving out there? He looked super athletic, had a great day for himself. So I think his draft stock went up, and I don't think that he's getting to 22 either. Let's see. Try a rye whiskey? I have. You guys have Blanton's there in Idaho. That's great. Fano's not falling that far. As I was just saying, I think that his stock is on the rise of a handful of prospects. You could say 4 or 5 that I think are going to go earlier than some people actually expected. Post June 1st trade for A.J. Brown is what I'm seeing. Where is this remaining cap space going? Don't know. Again, I cannot foresee Joe Ortiz pulling off a trade that is going to have to include draft capital this year because the Chargers have so few of it. In this particular scenario, if it is a post June 1st, draft is in the rearview mirror. Let's not forget, this was a Chargers team that was right when the green flag dropped for free agent frenzy. When Alec Pierce ended up going back to the Indianapolis Colts, there were a number of teams, and the Chargers being one of them, that were aggressively pushing for Alex Pierce. And the reports that came back was that he actually turned down more money, namely from the Chargers, to go back to the Indianapolis Colts. And that's an interesting one. Considering the holes that you had at offensive line, you were very aggressive in the wide receiver market for that. Chargers may have shown their cards a little bit for what they want. Give Justin Herbert another playmaker in offense, which again, I don't think that anybody would disagree with that, but you do have to handle some things first. And as we saw last year, if nobody's blocking for your quarterback, your running backs aren't hitting holes and your quarterback's going to end up on the ground, and it doesn't matter who your wide receivers or your tight end is. You just have to fill certain needs first before you go out and you get some things like that done. So maybe it is. Maybe it is a possibility like that. I know people have thrown around the rumor that Jawan Jennings is going to be another possibility for the Chargers. Who knows when that signing may or may not take place? Who knows? We don't know. But I don't think that Joe Ortiz is necessarily resting on his laurels right now. Again, I think from the standpoint of outside of one position, the most important position, he's done a very good job of bringing in players that he was able to get on lower contracts before the market was reset, some surprise cuts from teams that he was able to swoop in very quickly to bring onto the Chargers, and especially for some of your internal free agents that you needed to sign. Del'Shawn Phillips, Denzel Perryman, Tony Jefferson, Khalil Mack. Those are big. And so I think overall, given the landscape of what he had to do, is it still a incomplete at this point? Yes. It does not get a letter grade from me because I don't think that enough has been done to that offensive line yet. But as everybody has said, they reserve the right to put the letter grade or their judgment on the job that Joe Ortiz has done until after the draft, and which is fair because they do go hand in hand. That is when you could say that you have done the bulk of building your roster. So we will see come April 23rd for sure. I'm going to give about another 5 minutes here because you guys have been spectacular in getting some questions in for tonight. And again, I know it's been a long time since Dan and I had gotten a chance to get in front of you guys. We love doing the live show format. And of course, when it comes to this time, over the next several weeks, we're going to have plenty to talk about as it relates to the NFL draft and any additional free agency moves that are made between now and then. We'll obviously talk about. Let's see. I like this one. I'm assuming that these are the priorities as far as the Chargers goes for the draft strategy. So in this case, the Mighty Kev is saying, or are you basically saying edge is the top priority here? Not necessarily in that draft order. And so edge in round 1, which I'm on board with, depending on who's there. If you got TJ Parker, is it too rich for you at 22? Do you think that you could secure him in a trade back? And if you move back 6 spots to 28, maybe. Guard, second and third round, absolutely. I definitely think that you're going to invest in your interior defensive line again. I think this is going to be a premium for this team in the trenches, 100%. I would throw corner in this mix, 100. Absolutely, I would. I think you still need to keep churning that part of the roster. Wide receiver, I could see a possibility on day 3. And again, we talk about the trade down is going to be a bigger possibility or the biggest question mark for the Chargers. If you were able to acquire that additional draft capital, all the other possibilities open up. If I was to say what would be my top 4 positions that I would say that you absolutely cannot get out of round 4 without investing in prior to that or after that, edge, interior offensive line, corner, and interior defensive line. Those would be my top 4. I think the rest, whether we're talking about linebacker, which I think is a very deep class, if you're going to add another tight end to this mix, which I absolutely could see happening, I think you could find that on day 3. And same thing with wide receiver. For what the Chargers need, given that it's kind of a luxury for them with who the wide receiver core is, I think you can wait till then to fit a wide receiver that could fit your needs on that. But those would be my top 4 positions. Is Mesidor too old? No. At least in my opinion, he's not. The dude is a beast. And I know that everybody is questioning it from the standpoint to say, well, he's going to be 25 by the time that he enters the league. By the time that he gets his second contract, he's going to be 30 years old. But think about the damage that you could do with Tuli Tuipulotu and Akeem Mesidor for 5 years. That would be a nasty edge duo. So you take age aside, trust what you've seen from him. And there are always these situations when it comes to certain players, is he being inflated because he's playing across from Ruben Bain in Miami's defense? And in my opinion, he's not. Both guys have thrived on their own merit in that defense and made themselves each look better. But putting them independently on opposite teams when they're not on the same roster, they're still going to thrive. I do not believe in the short arm argument for Ruben Bain. Just watch what you've seen. There are outliers in those situations. You've seen it at edge happen every once in a while. Ruben Bain falls in that category. And for older players, when you just look at the level and speed and competitiveness that Akeem Mesidor plays with, I don't care about age in that circumstance when I see what he's putting on tape. I will use age in different arguments if the film is not there. But when you see what he's done, man, oh man, I would not hate Akeem Mesidor to the Chargers one bit. As a matter of fact, I would be thrilled with that. And I would be prepared for everybody who comes forth and say, well, damn it, he's probably not going to see a second contract with the Chargers because he's going to be 30 years old. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Him and Thule would be a nasty duo. Let's see, love Mesidor, don't give a crap about his age. Worry about that in 2031. Exactly. We got time. Mesidor and Logan Jones are some flashy 25-year-old players that could help us win now. 100%. 100%. There's a number of players that are coming into this. And again, it's because of the additional college year. I think this is the last year that you're going to see this handful of older players coming into the draft. I think if I'm right, this is the last year for that. But you have a number of players at multiple positions where you have some guys that have put together some really, really good college tape, but they're 23, 24, 25. And yeah, you're going to have some questions about that. But this is going to be the last of that wave, thankfully, that you're going to see. But still, a number of guys that are on these lists, age be damned. They're going to be able to come to the NFL and perform 100%. Let's see. I can get to this one first. I like Mesidor too, but it's too deep at edge to trade back. You get a starting guard, and then you get an edge. Guard falls off a bit after the mid-second round. I'm going to flip that. Look at the premium that's going to be put on. You could pinpoint it to edge, or you could pinpoint it to defense as a whole. You're going to have a number of defensive players going off the board in the first round. Good percentage of those too are obviously going to be some of the premier edge rushers of this group. I think in rounds 2 or 3, you can get a solid starting caliber guard, 100%. I think if you're looking for the next guy who's going to pair with Tuli Tuipulotu over the next 5 years, that has to be made in your first 2 selections. Can you do it? Yes. I'm not against this argument, depending on how the board falls for sure. Like I mentioned, if it's Venga, you take him. Don't even think twice. That's going to be a solid person to put next to Rashawn Slater and put in between Slater and Biotic and be a staple for you at that left guard spot. You don't even think twice if he happens to fall from you to the left. You thank the football gods, you say thank you very much, and you haul ass to the podium. But most likely that scenario does not pan out. And in that circumstance, you probably have to shift your entire draft strategy. And that's why I lean towards the edge position in that circumstance. All right, guys, we're getting towards the end here. I'm going to answer just a couple more before we get out of here. If there is one player at 22 you never pass on, but otherwise you trade back, that was just what I was mentioning with Venga. I think that you don't think twice about it. You don't hesitate. You turn that card in as fast as you can. If for some reason he makes it past Baltimore, if he makes it past Detroit, if he makes it past Pittsburgh, you run that card in as fast as you can. I really like Derek Moore as an edge rusher. Again, you make the the obvious connection with Jim Harbaugh. He recruited him at Michigan during his time there. And I really like what he could bring as an edge. I will say this. I probably would have liked Derek Moore a lot more if we were talking about Odafe Oweh returning and you were to tell me that, oh yeah, Derek Moore could be like your edge 3. I'm still not against it though, because I have liked what I've seen from him on tape. I don't like it as much as I would as a TJ Parker or an Akeem Mesidor or Malachi Lawrence in that case. But I would be a fan of Moore if they drafted him whenever he comes off the board. Hanan Derry, I know Hanan has actually asked this question a number of times as far as Spencer Fano being on the board. Again, I just don't see him, especially now, you could say whatever you want about his position conversion from going to tackle to guard. Do I think that he could play it? For sure. I'm not against it. I think some team is going to draft him possibly a guard, but I think that he's going to go off the board a lot earlier than what people are expecting. This is a cruel question. I've never played in the NFL, so you'd have to go Bradley Bozeman. That's not fair. Let's see. By the way, what the hell with Kyle Kennard? Is he the edge version of Junior Colson? I think it's too early to say that. Number one, because Kyle Kennard wasn't really playing with the extensive injuries and unfortunate luck that Junior Colson has had to go through over the past 2 years. He's going to get his opportunity this year. When you look at what Khalil Mack is still going to bring value to that edge group as far as being a leader goes, whoever they're going to bring in to be their edge 3, Kyle Kennard is going to get more of an opportunity this year because Bud Dupree is not going to be on the roster. Say what you will about the decisions to start him over, Dupree over Kennard. There was obviously reasons for that. I think you're going to see a much better version of him in his second year. I thought he was a really good edge player coming out of South Carolina when the Chargers drafted him. I expected much better things out of him coming into a rookie season. Unfortunately, that just didn't end up playing out, but I do foresee a much better second year for him. There are a few teams higher that see him as a tackle. Fano, that is, will be gone before. Yeah, again, we go back to that versatility. The more positions you can play, the more valuable you are. That's just how it is. Like, I would not be surprised if Fano doesn't get out of the top 10. Not at all. And then you still have, 3 to 5 teams that could use an offensive lineman like that of his caliber, whether it's playing guard or tackle, 100%. All right. Well, we're gonna wrap it up on that note. Again, I appreciate all of you guys coming on here. I know that this ended up turning into more of a draft questionnaire podcast, which I am totally for, by the way. The next time we want to do that, let's get that on the books. Let's see what we can possibly do to just have a fireside chat as it relates to the NFL draft. I'm all for that. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. I know that we kind of put this together at the last minute. I knew I just wanted to come in and I tried to get some topics out there to you guys, given the fact that Dan and I had not gotten a chance due to scheduling to record a show to go over all of the recent moves over the last week. So I appreciate all of the 322 of you on a Wednesday night that have come in here. Again, we're going to have plenty of stuff to discuss as it relates to free agency and especially the NFL draft over the next 5 weeks. And as I mentioned, Dan and I are going to have some special things going on for you guys that you should all be looking forward to seeing. But once again, appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. And we will see you next time on Chargers Unleashed.